The night air bit against Selene's skin as she stood in the center of the pack's courtyard, her heart pounding louder than the murmurs circling her like vultures. Torches hissed in the darkness, their flames swaying in cruel rhythm with the mocking laughter that surrounded her. She tried to keep her chin raised, but the weight of 100 eyes bore down on her fragile frame until her knees trembled. "Omega!" Someone spat from the crowd, the word twisted into a weapon. She flinched, but did not answer. If she gave them her voice, they would only shred it apart. On the steps of the great hall, Alpha Darius, once the leader she had trusted, once the man who promised to protect all his wolves, looked down at her as though she were filth staining his boots. His eyes, once steady, were sharp with disgust. His decree cut through the night like a blade. "Selene of the Ashfang pack is no longer one of us. She is weak. She is unworthy. She is nothing." A gasp rippled through the crowd, though none stepped forward to defend her. Not even those who had once shared meals and laughter with her. Loyalty to the Alpha outweighed compassion. Her chest burned as if claws raked through her ribs. She searched the sea of faces, desperate for one, just one, that would show mercy. But where she hoped for kindness, she found only sneers, smirks, and eyes that turned away to avoid the stain of her shame. Betrayal stung more deeply than the rejection itself. "Cast her out," Darius growled, his voice final, merciless. 2 warriors stepped forward, grabbing her by the arms. Their grip was iron, but she didn't fight. What would be the point? She had no pack anymore, no name, no home. The crowd parted as they dragged her toward the border, whispers rising like smoke. She was too weak. Pathetic. "She'll never survive out there." Selene's throat tightened, but she swallowed her tears. They would not have the satisfaction of seeing her break. When the gates groaned open, the wilderness beyond stretched out like the maw of a beast. The borderlands were no place for the packless. Wild wolves roamed there, bloodthirsty rogues, and spirits older than memory whispered in the shadows. The warriors shoved her forward, and Selene stumbled into the dirt, her palms scraping against the cold earth. She turned once, hoping, foolishly, that someone might call her back, that the Alpha's heart might soften at the last moment. But the gates slammed shut behind her, sealing her exile. Silence fell, broken only by the low moan of the wind through the trees. For the first time in her life, she was truly alone. Her body shook as she pushed herself to her feet. Pain radiated through her chest, but it was not from the fall. It was from the shattering of every bond she had ever known. The mate bond she had once dreamed of, the ties of sisterhood and brotherhood she had built, gone. Stripped away with a few words from an Alpha who had never seen her for who she was. Selene pressed her arms around herself, as though holding her own broken pieces together. She wandered forward, the forest swallowing her small form. Every step was heavy, each one echoing the truth she could no longer deny. She was unwanted. The moon hung above her, pale and cold, watching without comfort. "Why?" she whispered into the night, her voice hoarse. "Why was I never enough?" Her words disappeared into the darkness, unanswered. Branches clawed at her arms as she pressed deeper into the borderlands. The soil was damp, smelling of moss and old secrets. Every sound set her nerves on edge, the hoot of an owl, the crackle of leaves, the distant howl of a rogue. Fear threaded through her veins, but there was no choice except forward. Her stomach twisted with hunger, her body trembling from exhaustion. She had been given no food, no supplies, nothing but the rags on her back. They hadn't just cast her out, they had left her to die. Memories clawed their way into her mind. The smirk on Darius's face as he declared her unworthy, the way the pack had turned away, the laughter of wolves she had once called family. Every image cut deeper until she felt she might bleed out from the inside. Still, she did not stop. The deeper she walked, the stronger the air felt, thick with something she could not name. The borderlands were not empty. They thrummed with whispers, unseen eyes following her every move. At first, she thought it was her imagination, the tricks of a weary mind. But then the voices came, faint, echoing, carried on the wind. The broken one walks. She carries the mark of ash. The moon has not forgotten. Selene froze, her breath catching in her throat. She spun in circles, searching the trees, but there was no one. Only shadows swaying between the trunks. Her pulse raced, and she staggered backward until her foot caught on a root. She fell hard, the impact jarring her bones. For a moment, she lay there, staring up at the crimson-tinged moon, tears spilling silently from her eyes. She had lost everything, and now even the forest itself mocked her. But in the hollow ache of her chest, something stirred. A faint ember, buried deep beneath years of scorn. Destiny. The word was a whisper in her mind, softer than the wind, yet impossible to ignore. She sat up slowly, clutching her chest. She did not understand it, but the ache inside her shifted, turning into something sharper. Her journey had begun, not by choice, but by force. She was broken, yes, cast out, shamed, alone. But she was not yet finished. The whispers in the trees seemed to follow her as she rose and walked deeper into the night. Selene of the Ashfang pack was gone. But something else, something unclaimed and unknown, was waking inside her. And though she could not see it, the crimson moonlight clung to her like a blessing and a warning, marking the first step of a destiny far greater than the chains she had left behind. The crimson moon loomed high above the distant mountains, its glow spilling across the vast lands Damien Stormborn ruled with an iron hand. The world whispered his name in fear, and even beyond the borders of his kingdom, his reputation struck like thunder before a storm. Yet in the silence of his private chambers, where no warriors watched and no courtiers bowed, Damien was not at peace. He sat at the edge of a stone balcony, the night air whipping through his dark hair, his golden eyes narrowed at the horizon. The wind carried the scent of pine, steel, and rain, yet none of it calmed him. Sleep had eluded him again, chased away by the haunting dreams that gnawed at the edges of his mind. Always the same. A faceless woman, her presence both shadow and flame. She came to him in silence, her form blurred, but her touch burned, leaving behind a strange ache in his chest that he could not name. Her laughter echoed sometimes, soft and broken, like shards of glass tumbling through the air. Other nights, he heard her cries, aching and hollow, until he woke with his hands clenched into fists, fury and longing tangled inside him. He did not know who she was. He did not know why she plagued him, but each night the dream left him restless, a storm raging beneath his skin. Behind him the heavy doors creaked open. Boots struck against stone, steady and measured, carrying with them the sharp scent of leather and iron. Kyle Draven, his beta, his most trusted second, stepped into the chamber. His presence was unshaken, his bearing as disciplined as steel drawn from the forge. "You haven't slept," Kale observed, his tone calm, but his sharp gaze lingered on Damien's shoulders. Damien did not turn. His jaw tightened, his voice low, edged with impatience. "Sleep wastes time. Not when the king is needed." "Strong," Kale countered. The silence between them stretched. Damien's golden eyes flicked toward the horizon, where storm clouds had begun to gather, veiling the stars. Thunder rumbled faintly, far away yet inevitable. Kael followed his gaze, his expression unreadable. "The storm approaches," he said at last, his voice carrying a weight that was not about the weather alone. Damien's lips curved, not in amusement, but in challenge. "Let it." Kael's eyes narrowed slightly. "You felt it too, then?" Damien's silence was answer enough. The beta stepped closer, the firelight from the chamber casting his features in stark lines. "The kingdom whispers of unrest. Rogues stir in the borderlands. Old alliances crumble. And you—" His words broke for a moment, as though he were measuring their weight. "You've been unsettled." Damien finally turned, his gaze sharp enough to cut. "Do you question me, Kael?" The beta did not flinch. "I question what haunts you. You are not a man who loses sleep easily." For a long moment, the chamber was thick with unspoken tension. Then Damien pushed away from the balcony, his steps deliberate, the weight of his presence filling the space. He stood tall, every inch the Alpha King, a man carved from war and dominance, but his voice carried a raw edge when he finally spoke. "She comes to me." Kael's brow furrowed. "Who?" "I don't know," Damien admitted, his tone harsh, as though the words themselves angered him. "A woman, in my dreams, faceless, nameless, but I feel her, as though she is carved into my very blood." Kael studied him in silence, his sharp mind working behind his eyes. "She is not just a dream," Damien continued, pacing now, his hand dragging along the stone wall as though the act could tether him to reality. "She ignites something in me I cannot control. Rage, longing, fire. It is as if the moon herself placed her in my path, though I cannot see her face." The storm outside crackled, lightning flashing across the horizon. The wind surged, rattling the torches until shadows danced along the walls. Kael's esprit, Sion, grew grim. "Then perhaps the storm is not just of the skies." Damien stilled. His gaze met Kael's, golden eyes burning with something raw, something unspoken. "You think it's an omen," Damien said. "I think," Kael answered carefully, "that nothing comes to the Alpha King without reason. If she haunts you, it is because she belongs to what is coming." Damien's hand clenched at his side, his nails biting into his palm. The word belongs unsettled him, but he did not dismiss it. He had ruled kingdoms, crushed rebellions, silenced traitors, yet this dream, this faceless ghost, unmade him in ways no blade ever could. The thunder rolled closer, echoing through the mountains, and Damien tilted his head back, staring at the sky. The crimson moon still hung above, a twin to the storm that seethed within him. "Let the storm come," he murmured, more to himself than to Kael. "I will meet it as I have met every enemy, on my knees for no one." Kael bowed his head in respect, though unease lingered in his eyes. Damien turned away, but the ghost of the dream clung to him still. The faceless woman, her touch like fire, her presence both curse and salvation. He could not banish her, no matter how hard he tried. And though he did not yet know it, beneath the same crimson moon that haunted his restless nights, a broken Omega wandered the borderlands, carrying within her the answer to the storm that shadowed his soul. The forest was darker than usual, shadows stretched long beneath the swollen moon. Selene trudged forward, her steps heavy, her body weary from days of wandering. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and yet something else pressed upon her chest, a sense that she was not as alone as the night tried to make her believe. She paused at the edge of a clearing, breathing shallowly, listening. The wind carried more than the scent of pine and damp earth. It carried something, none sharper, stronger, male. A prickle of fear stirred down her spine. Wolves! Before she could turn, figures emerged from the shadows. Broad shoulders, gleaming eyes, armor glinting faintly in the moonlight. She recognized them instantly for what they were. Patrols. Not just any wolves. They bore the mark of the Stormfang crest, etched into their leathers, silver against black. Selene's heart thundered. The Stormfang pack, the Alpha King's own. Her breath caught as one of them raised his hand. There! His voice rang across the night, and before she could flee, 3 warriors closed in. She ran anyway. Her bare feet tore against roots and rocks. Her lungs burned, but the ground was unforgiving. They caught her with little effort, one hand clamping hard around her arm, yanking her back with a force that stole her breath. An Omega? One sneered, tugging at her tattered cloak. Pathetic. Selene struggled, but she was no match for trained warriors. They bound her wrists, ignoring her protests, dragging her toward the heart of their encampment. Fear gripped her throat. To fall into the hands of any pack was danger enough, but to fall into the hands of the Alpha King's men, that was death itself. The firelight of their camp spread across her face as she stumbled into the clearing. Warriors turned to look at her, some with disdain, others with curiosity. But all made way as one figure emerged from the shadows. Damien. He stood at the center, taller than the others, a storm contained within flesh and bone. His golden eyes burned like lightning behind the veil of night, his presence so commanding that silence rippled through the camp the instant he appeared. Selene froze. She had never seen him before, not truly, and yet the very sight of him struck something deep within her, a chord she could neither name nor silence. The warriors shoved her forward. She fell to her knees in the dirt before him, her wrists still bound, her chest heaving. Damien's gaze fell upon her. He should have dismissed her instantly, another fragile stray not worth the time, and yet, the moment his eyes met hers, he stilled. There was something there, something he couldn't name. His jaw tightened. The dreams, the faceless woman. For nights she had haunted him, her presence filling his sleep with restless fire. And now, staring at this frail, trembling Omega, he felt that same fire stir. But it couldn't be. Damien stepped closer, his boots heavy against the earth. He studied her face in silence, searching for an answer that eluded him. The girl did not cower, not entirely. Her eyes lifted to meet his, uncertain, defiant, and unbearably vulnerable all at once. "Who are you?" His voice was low, dangerous, carrying the weight of command. Selene swallowed hard, her throat dry. "No one," she whispered. "I'm no one." Her words cut him in a way he did not expect. He should have been satisfied. He should have walked away. But something about the way she said it, like she had been told so many times, she had begun to believe it, kindled an anger in him he did not understand. Kyle, his beta, stepped forward. "My king," he said sharply. "She's a wanderer, likely banished. We should rid ourselves of her before she brings trouble." Damien didn't respond. He couldn't tear his eyes from her. Selene's heart pounded in her chest. The bond, faint but undeniable, brushed against her soul like the touch of unseen fingers. She felt it in the space between them, heavy and forbidden. She averted her gaze, terrified that if she looked too long, the truth would spill from her eyes. Damien turned away suddenly, as though breaking the thread that had begun to pull him closer. "Lock her away for the night," he ordered, his tone clipped. "I'll decide what to do with her at dawn." The warriors moved to obey, dragging Selene toward the edge of camp. But in that fleeting moment, before she disappeared into the shadows, she glanced back over her shoulder and found him watching her still. His stare lingered, longer than it should have, haunted and unspoken. That night, Selene lay in the cold confines of a tent, her wrists sore, her body aching. But her thoughts were elsewhere, on the man with golden eyes who should have hated her, yet whose silence felt heavier than any blade. Across camp, Damien sat by the fire, his hand tightening around the hilt of his sword. He told himself she was nothing, a fragile omega, a distraction he could not afford. And yet, when he closed his eyes, it was her face that rose in his mind, chasing away the faceless woman of his dreams. Neither spoke the truth aloud, neither dared to name what had begun. But the pull was there, dangerous, forbidden, irrevocable. A storm had begun to form, one that neither of them could outrun. The night dragged on in silence, though sleep eluded both Selene and Damien. She lay curled in the corner of the tent where the guards had left her, the ropes around her wrists long since loosened, but the ache of restraint still burning into her skin. Beyond the canvas, the low murmur of voices rose and fell with the shifting winds. Somewhere, the fire crackled, and the howl of a distant wolf echoed across the ridges. She tried to close her eyes, tried to shut it out. But when she did, all she saw was him, the Alpha King, golden-eyed and unyielding. His stare had followed her into the shadows, and now it haunted her more than the memory of being dragged in chains. Why? Why would a man like him look at her as though he knew her, as though she mattered? Her heart was foolish to even wonder. He was storm and steel. She was ash and ruin. Nothing more. Across camp, Damien sat by the fire, restless. The others had long since fallen into slumber, but his mind refused stillness. He had faced warlords, traitors, and bloodshed without hesitation. Yet one fragile girl, bound and trembling, unsettled him more than any blade ever had. He had not imagined it. The pull was real. It had struck him like lightning, the same way it plagued his dreams. But fate was not always kin. It had a cruel hand, often leading kings into ruin disguised as desire. When dawn broke, the camp shifted with new life. Armor clanged, voices rose, and the patrols prepared for their return to the fortress. Damien gave no word on Selene's fate. Not yet. But whispers carried faster than fire, and by the time they reached the Stormfang stronghold, word of the captured Omega had already spread. Among those who listened was Lyra, Selene's sister. Her beauty had always been remarked upon, her clever tongue sharp enough to twist even venom into honey. She had watched Selene stumble through life as the frail, overlooked child, and though others pitied her, Lyra only felt a bitter satisfaction. Selene had never deserved notice, never deserved more than the scraps she was given. And now, fate had placed her in the hands of the Alpha King. Lyra's lips curled into a smile as cold as it was sweet. Not if she could help it. She slipped her way into the court under the guise of loyalty, her voice soft and laced with concern. She bowed low, her hair spilling like dark silk over her shoulders, her eyes shining with a feigned devotion. "My king," she said when Damien granted her an audience, "I bring you warning." Damien's gaze, sharp and unreadable, lifted from the reports he had been studying. "Speak then." Lyra lowered her lashes, her tone a careful mix of fear and reverence. "The girl you found, the one called Selene, she is not as she seems." His jaw tightened, though his expression betrayed nothing. "And how would you know this?" "She is my sister," Lyra breathed, her words dripping with false sorrow. "I know her better than anyone. She is clever in her weakness, my king. She hides her true nature beneath trembling hands. Do not be fooled. She has betrayed every pack she's ever touched." The room stirred with murmurs, the advisors glancing between one another, their suspicion already fanned. Damien's eyes narrowed. He remembered the girl's quiet defiance, the way she had whispered she was no one. It had sounded like a confession, not a deception. And yet, could she truly have fooled even him? Lyra pressed further, her voice weaving like a silken net. "She is cursed, marked by misfortune. Wherever she walks, ruin follows. Ask the border packs. They cast her out. Why? Because she cannot be trusted. I beg you, do not let her poison your kingdom as she poisoned them." The venom in her tone was hidden beneath layers of sweetness, so carefully masked that even those who doubted felt their resolve waver. Damien dismissed her with a nod, though her words lingered. He had seen deceit before, worn its mask in 100 forms, and yet her claim gnawed at him. That night, when Selene was brought before him, the shadows in his eyes had grown heavier. She felt it the moment his gaze met hers, colder now, as though some fragile thread between them had frayed. "Your sister has spoken for you," Damien said, his voice quiet, cutting. Selene's breath caught. "Lyra?" The name tasted of salt and pain on her tongue. "She says you are a liar. That betrayal follows you like a shadow." Selene's heart cracked at the edges, the weight of her sister's hatred pressing down harder than the ropes ever had. "And you believe her?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Damien did not answer. His silence was worse than accusation. Selene's chest tightened. All her life she had endured cruelty, indifference, mockery. But this was different. His doubt was a blade she had not been prepared to take. She turned her face away, hiding the tears that burned her eyes. Lyra watched from the edge of the hall, her smile hidden behind a mask of sisterly grief. She had planted the seed. Now all she needed was time for it to grow. Selene returned to her chamber that night with a heart heavier than chains. She curled against the stone wall, the flicker of torchlight casting cruel shadows across her face. She told herself not to care. He was a king, she was nothing. But the ache in her chest betrayed her. Somewhere between fear and hope, she had let him matter. And now his silence mattered most of all. Damien stood alone in his chamber, staring into the fire, his hands clenched at his sides, his thoughts torn. The pull between them had not lessened. It burned still, deep and undeniable. But Lyra's words had coiled like smoke around his heart, making him doubt his own judgment. For the first time in years, the Alpha King hesitated. And in the silence of his hesitation, betrayal had already begun to bloom. The fortress was quieter that night, though peace was only an illusion. Selene sat alone in the cold chamber where she had been left, the torchlight casting flickers of gold across stone walls that felt more like a cage than a shelter. Her hands curled tightly in her lap as she replayed his words again and again, his silence sharper than any blade, his gaze heavy with mistrust. Her sister's lies had wrapped chains tighter around her heart than the ropes ever had. She pressed her forehead to her knees, willing herself not to cry. She had shed too many tears already, in too many places where no one cared. But this was different. This cut deeper. His doubt mattered in a way she did not want to admit. Outside, the fortress bustled with quiet activity. footsteps echoing in halls, murmurs carried in the night. Yet something in the air shifted, an unseen presence sliding across the silence. Selene felt it before she heard it, the strange chill that prickled along her skin, the hush that seemed to press the very air flat. When she lifted her head, a shadow was already in the corner of her room. The figure was cloaked in grey, the hood low enough to veil her face. Those strands of silver hair slipped free like threads of moonlight. She moved without sound, her steps more like drifting mist than flesh and bone. Selene's wreath caught. "Who are you?" The figure raised her head, and eyes unlike any she had ever seen glowed faintly in the dark, pale, like frosted glass that still somehow held the reflection of stars. Her voice was a whisper, but it carried as though the stone itself leaned in to listen. "Era," she said, "the seer of shadows." Selene pressed back against the wall, fear warring with awe. "How did you—" "The guards." "No walls hold out the will of the moon," Era murmured. "And no guards see what they are not meant to." Her presence filled the small chamber with something heavier than air, something older. Selene felt it coil around her like invisible threads, not threatening, but unyielding. Era's gaze lingered on her, as though reading not just her face, but her soul itself. "You wonder why your sister despises you. You wonder why the king doubts you. You wonder why fate twists its knife so deep." Selene's lips parted, but no words came. Era stepped closer, lowering her hood. Her face was carved with lines of age, but her beauty was untamed, her expression both kind and merciless. "Because, child, you are not meant for shadows. You were born for storms." Selene shook her head, a bitter laugh trembling in her throat. "No, I am nothing. That is what I am told. That is what I am. I was cast out, spat on, rejected. Even he," her voice cracked, "even he doubts me." For a long moment, the seer only looked at her. Then she knelt, her hand hovering just above Selene's heart. "And yet your bond with him stirs the tides of prophecy." Selene stilled. "Bond?" Era's pale eyes shone brighter, as if lit from within. "The Alpha King, the storm-born ruler whose golden eyes you cannot escape. The thread between you is no accident. It was woven before your birth, tied in blood, in fire, in moonlight. Together, you are the edge of fate itself." Selene's throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, wanted to turn her face from the truth, but the very sound of his name in her heart betrayed her. She had felt it, that pull, that dangerous forbidden tether that should not exist yet did. "What does it mean?" she whispered. The seer's voice deepened, her words rhythmic, as though spoken by something beyond her own tongue. "Two souls, bound by fire and storm, shall rise to heal or break the world. If trust is whole, the night will fade. If trust is broken, all shall burn." The words hung in the chamber like smoke, lingering, choking, refusing to be forgotten. Selene's hands trembled in her lap. "Heal or break the world?" Era leaned back, her expression unreadable. "Your love, child, is both the salvation and the ruin of wolf-kind. What you choose, what he chooses, will decide if the moonlight falls or endures." Selene's breath faltered. "Then I am a danger to him." The seer tilted her head, her voice soft. "You are not the danger. Fear is, doubt is, betrayal is. The bond is not a weapon, but those who envy it will turn it into one." tears slipped free despite Selene's effort to hold them back. "He already doubts me. My sister has poisoned him against me. If this bond is true, if it is real, I will destroy him." Era's gaze gentled, though the weight of prophecy never lessened. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you will save him from himself." The torchlight flickered, the air stirred, and when Selene blinked, the seer was gone. Only the echo of her words remained, lodged in Selene's heart like a thorn she could not dislodge. She drew her knees closer to her chest aching with the weight of truth. She wanted to believe the bond was a gift, but all she could feel was terror. For if the seer was right, her love was no longer her own. It belonged to fate, to prophecy, to a future that might end in fire. And across the fortress, Damien stood on the balcony of his chamber, staring into the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. His doubts had grown heavy, his chest restless with something he refused to name. Yet in the silence, he swore home he could feel her. The same bond that pulled him nearer also pushed him toward ruin. Neither of them slept. Neither of them knew which choice would one day save them or destroy them all. The night weighed heavy, thick with secrets that clung to every corridor of the fortress. Selene moved quietly through the dim halls, her steps muffled against the stone. Sleep would not come. Not after the seer's words had carved themselves into her chest. Every shadow seemed to whisper her name, every flicker of torchlight stretched long and sharp, like claws reaching for her. But it wasn't the prophecy alone that kept her restless. No, it was something darker, something closer. For days she had felt the unease, the way Lyra's gaze lingered, sharp and cold, the way whispers curled around corners when Selene entered a room. Her sister's sweet words and gentle smiles no longer fooled her. Beneath that honey lay venom, and Selene was beginning to taste it. She passed through an archway, the moonlight slanting in through tall windows, silver washing over her pale face. She paused, her chest tightening. Voices carried in the stillness, hushed and urgent. She pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering as she listened. "Damien grows blind," a man's voice rasped. "The bond distracts him. This is our chance." Selene's blood froze. She inched closer, careful not to breathe too loud. "And the girl?" another voice asked. Familiar, soft, too familiar. Selene's chest constricted. Lyra. Her sister's voice coiled like smoke in the air, delicate yet cutting. "Leave her to me. Damien is already questioning her loyalty. It won't take much to tip his trust into doubt. Once she is condemned, the bond will break, and he will fall." The words sliced through Selene's heart, crueler than any blade. Her sister, the girl she had once trusted, once loved, was not only lying, but conspiring with Damien's enemies. Her stomach churned, and her fingers dug into the wall to keep herself steady. "You had better not fail us," the first man growled. "If the king suspects—" "He won't," Lyra interrupted, her tone silken. "He sees what I show him, and nothing more. By the next moon, the throne will belong to those who deserve it. And Selene, she will be nothing but ashes." A cold shiver ran down Selene's spine. She stumbled back, desperate to breathe, desperate to escape before they sensed her. Her heart thundered in her ears as she turned down the corridor, the weight of betrayal pressing like iron on her shoulders. Her sister, her own blood. She wanted to run to Damien, to spill everything she had heard, to beg him to see through Lyra's deceit. But doubt gnawed at her. What if he didn't believe her? What if Lyra had already poisoned him too deeply? Still, she could not stay silent. She would not. Her feet carried her swiftly through the winding halls until she reached the courtyard. The night air was sharp, biting her skin as though reminding her of the truth. She turned toward the steps that led to Damien's chamber, only for shadows to erupt from the darkness. Hands seized her arms, rough and unyielding. She cried out, struggling, but cold steel clamped around her wrists. Shackles. "Let me go!" she gasped, her voice breaking. A guard sneered down at her, his grip cruel. "Treasonous snake," he spat. "Did you think we would not find out?" Her breath stilled. What are you talking about?" Another guard held up a parchment sealed with Damien's crest. "Evidence, proof of your betrayal, plans you sent to the enemy, letters in your own hand." Selene's head shook violently, her pulse screaming, "No, that's a lie, I never—" But they did not listen. The bond thrummed wildly in her chest, tugging toward Damien, but she could not reach him. Every tug was agony, as though her soul itself was being bound alongside her wrists. They dragged her through the courtyard, her feet scraping against the stones, her heart breaking with every step. She lifted, her eyes desperate for someone to see, for someone to stop this madness, but the night was empty, the fortress asleep to her cries. Her thoughts raced back to Lyra, the smile, the softness, the knife behind her words. This was her doing. Every stitch of this trap had been sewn by her own sister's hand. Selene stumbled as the guards shoved her toward the holding cells beneath the fortress. The air grew colder, damp with the scent of rot and iron. The clang of the door echoed like thunder, sealing her away from light. She fell to her knees, the shackles biting into her skin, tears burning hot against her cheeks. How quickly everything had turned. How easily truth had been buried beneath lies. The prophecy's weight returned to her, heavier now than ever. Save or destroy. But how could she save anyone when she was already caged, branded a traitor in the eyes of the only man who mattered? Her head dropped forward, her voice a whisper only the stones could hear. "Moon above, don't let him believe them. Don't let him abandon me." But deep down, Selene feared the truth. Lyra's poison had already been dripping into Damien's ear, and now, framed and shackled, Selene's fate rested not in her own hands, but in his. And she did not know if his heart still belonged to her or to the lies. The cell was cold, its stone walls seeping into Selene's bones, but it was nothing compared to the chill of Damien's eyes as he stood before her. Golden, burning, unreadable, his wolf clawed inside him, restless, demanding he tear the chains from her wrists and pull her into his arms. Yet the whispers of betrayal gnawed at his mind like poison. She was accused. She was framed. But what if the evidence was real? What if fate had bound him to a woman who would undo him? His chest rose and fell, each breath heavier than the last. He was the Alpha King, feared by all, yet in this moment he was nothing more than a man at war with himself. "Selene," he said at last, his voice gravel and thunder, "if I open these chains and you betray me, you will not only break me, you will breed." "Like this kingdom?" Her eyes lifted to his, shimmering with hurt and a love she could not silence. "Damien, if you cannot see my truth, then no chain will matter. I will still belong to you." The words cracked something inside him. His wolf howled, clawing to be free, desperate to claim her, desperate to shield her. Yet the human part of him reeled, bound by doubt. Kael's warning echoed in his mind. "Do not let her blind you. Love is weakness." And Lyra's honeyed words still lingered. "She hides secrets from you. She is not who she seems." Damien turned his head, growling low, torn between two worlds, the bond and the blade. Selene shifted against the wall, the iron biting her wrists. Pain etched into her body, but her voice trembled with quiet strength. You don't have to believe the words of others. Test me yourself. Look into me. If I lie, if I falter, then let the chains remain. His breath hitched. No fear, no defiance, just truth laid bare. Slowly, he reached out, fingers brushing her cheek. Her skin was cold, fragile, yet it burned against his hand as though it had been made to fit him. The bond surged, wild and untamed, singing of her innocence, singing of fate. He closed his eyes, letting his wolf rise, and in the silence of the bond, he felt it. Her heart, steady, true, no venom, no treachery, only the quiet ache of love, raw and aching. When he opened his eyes, his resolve cracked. He gripped the chains and with one pull shattered the shackles. The iron fell away, clattering against the stones like broken lies. Selene gasped, her wrists free at last, though the wounds remained. But before relief could bloom, a shadow stirred above, a whisper of steel, a glint of silver in the torchlight. Damien's wolf roared. Instinct surged through him. He spun, pulling Selene against his chest just as a blade whistled through the air. The knife struck his shoulder, a slicing deep, meant for his heart. Selene cried out, her hands clutching him as crimson spread across his cloak. The guards shouted, chaos erupting as another figure fled into the shadows. The scent was unfamiliar, masked with smoke and ash. An assassin. Damien's knees buckled, but his arms held firm around Selene, shielding her from every danger. His voice came low, ragged with pain, but still unyielding. You see, they aim for me, not you. You were never the traitor, Selene. Tears streaked her face as she pressed her hand against his wound. Don't you dare leave me. Don't you dare think love is weakness when it's the only reason you're still breathing. His head lowered, his breath hot against her ear. Love is the only reason I fight. Around them, guards rushed, torches flared, but in that moment, there was only the two of them, her trembling hands, his broken body, and the bond blazing like fire through the darkness. Selene's chains were gone, but Damien's chains, those forged by doubt and betrayal, were only beginning to shatter. The storm within, war brews. Packs turn against Damien, emboldened by Lyra's lies. Selene, even in exile within the palace walls, becomes the key target. Torn between protecting her heart and protecting the Alpha King, she begins to discover the power lying dormant in her bloodline, a power greater than any Alpha. The fortress was no longer safe. Even in the gilded halls where the Alpha King walked, whispers followed Selene like shadows. Every glance carried suspicion. Every step she took carried eyes that watched for weakness, for the smallest misstep. She moved quietly, her cloak wrapped tight around her shoulders, but even the fabric could not hide the weight pressing on her chest. Lyra's words had spread like wildfire, poisoning hearts and minds. Those who once bowed to Damien now whispered that Selene was the true threat, the silent enemy at their Alpha's side. And many believed it. Many wanted it to be true. Selene's pulse thumped in her ears, louder than the footsteps echoing through the corridors. She felt the pull of the bond, a silent voice tugging her toward Damien, even when her instincts screamed to stay hidden. She had always known that her heart and her duty were entwined, but now the line between love and survival blurred beyond recognition. The wind rattled the windows, carrying a storm that mirrored the one building inside her. She pressed her hands against the sill, staring out into the night. Somewhere beyond the walls, packs moved, plotting, hunting, ready to strike at the king who was already fractured by lies. The bloodline in her veins stirred, faint but undeniable. A warmth that had lain dormant, sleeping under the years of fear and rejection, now pulsed like a heartbeat of its own. She flexed her fingers, feeling sparks run along her skin. Her wolf sensed it too, a ripple of power, a promise of strength she had never wielded. Selene closed her eyes. If I am to protect him, I must rise above the fear, above the chains of doubt. The halls shifted as guards moved past, their conversations hushed yet sharp. Every sentence she overheard tightened the knot in her chest. They spoke of plans, of alliances, of how to weaken Damien. And in every word, Selene heard her name, accused, feared, blamed. She would not flee, not this time. Her steps were deliberate as she made her way to the balcony overlooking the outer courtyard. The moonlight fell across her face, silver and unyielding. Her wolf stirred within, sensing the tension of the night, the presence of predators both seen and unseen. Suddenly, a shadow flickered beneath the outer walls. Selene tensed. A scout? Or a spy sent to test her, to see if the rumors of her treachery were true? A spark ignited inside her chest. She could feel it, ancient, wild, a part of herself she had never embraced. She inhaled deeply, drawing the power into her lungs, letting it thread through her veins, awakening muscles and says alike. Her hands glowed faintly, and a soft hum resonated in the air around her. The courtyard below froze, the patrols sensing something unspoken, something dangerous. She took a step forward, eyes narrowing, lips pressed in determination. I am no longer the mouse they claimed I was. I am Selene, and my heart, my blood, my power, all of it belongs to the one I love and the kingdom I will protect. The storm raged outside, wind tearing at her cloak, lightning slicing across the night sky. She raised her hands, letting the pulse of her power echo outward. Trees bent, a distant howl answered, and even the guards paused, sensing the force awakening within her. Damien, wounded though he was, appeared in the doorway behind her, leaning on Kale for support. His eyes widened as he took in the display, fear and awe mingling in his gaze. "Selene," he whispered, voice rough with pain. What is this?" Her gaze never wavered from the courtyard. "What it has always been," she said. "What I could never show when I was afraid. My power, my blood. And I will use it to protect you, Damien, even if the world turns against us." He staggered forward, anger, relief and awe battling in his expression. "Do you understand what this means?" "Yes," she said simply. "I understand what I'm capable of now, and I will not hide it." The storm outside mirrored the one within the fortress. Packs moved against Damien, emboldened by Lyra's lies, seeking the weakness they thought they could exploit. But they had not counted on the storm that had been sleeping in Selene's blood. A sudden clash rang out from the outer walls, a skirmish, perhaps a warning, perhaps the first strike of rebellion. Selene's wolf surged, and with her power awakening, she felt connected not only to Damien, but to every living thing in the courtyard. "Stay close," she told him, moving toward him despite the danger. Her hand brushed his arm. "If they come for you, they come for me too. I will not let them take you." He grabbed her hand, fingers entwining with hers, strength flowing from him despite his injuries. "Then we fight together," he said, voice resolute. "No matter what comes, Selene. No matter who betrays me, I will not lose you." The walls shuddered as distant horns sounded, heralding the approaching threat. Lyra's schemes had set the stage for war, and packs loyal to her whispered in the shadows, preparing to strike. Selene lifted her face to the sky, the wind whipping her hair across her cheeks. She felt the bond pulse stronger than ever, uniting her and Damien in a force far greater than either of them alone. The power in her bloodline, the one the seer had foretold, flowed like molten fire beneath her skin. She closed her eyes, letting it fill every nerve, every muscle, every beat of her heart. "I am ready," she whispered. "No more hiding, no more fear. Let them come." Lightning split the clouds above, illuminating her figure atop the balcony, radiant and unyielding. The storm within her mirrored the storm beyond the walls, wild, untamed, and unstoppable. And in that moment both Damien and Selene understood. The battle had only just begun, but together they could face anything, for love and power intertwined, and destiny itself would bow to the strength of the bonded Alpha and Omega. The winds roared, the pack trembled, and Selene's time had finally come. The first howl of war ripped through the fortress gates, echoing into the mountains beyond. Torches flared as packs loyal to Lyra surged forward, their snarls thick with hunger and deceit. Stone walls shook beneath the pounding of claws and the roar of wolves, every step a heartbeat of impending chaos. Selene stood on the balcony, her cloak whipping around her as wind tangled in her hair. The bond pulsed fiercely in her veins, a drumbeat in sync with her heart. Damien's hand gripped hers tightly, both of them bracing for the storm that had come at last. "Stay close," she whispered, eyes narrow, being at the approaching shadows. "We face them together." He nodded, golden eyes alight with both fear and determination. "Together," he repeated, letting the promise hang in the air like a sword. The gates shattered under the first wave. Wolves loyal to Lyra poured in, fangs bared, eyes glittering with the thrill of conquest. Damien's guards met them, steel and claws clashing, and Selene's wolf surged instinctively, sensing every threat, every heartbeat of the enemy. Her hands glowed faintly, as if the very moon had lent her its power. She stepped forward, and with a sweep of her hand, a wave of energy cascaded across the courtyard, throwing attackers off their feet. Some scrambled, others froze, sensing a force far beyond mortal strength. Damien fought beside her, his claws ripping into assailants, his roar shaking the ground. But every glance towards Selene reminded him of her power, her presence, and the prophecy they both carried. Lyra appeared suddenly atop the northern tower, her voice like honey laced with venom. "Did you really think you could claim him, that the weak Omega could rise above the throne?" Selene's eyes flared, and the air around her trembled. "I am no longer weak," she shouted, voice echoing like thunder. "I am Luna, born of prophecy, and I will not bow to lies." A shockwave rolled from her, knocking Lyra's followers back, scattering them like leaves in a storm. The loyalists of Damien rallied behind the Luna, their morale bolstered by the sight of the Omega transformed into something magnificent, something unstoppable. The clash intensified. Steel met claw, teeth sank into flesh, and the cries of betrayal and battle mingled into a cacophony that shook the air. Selene moved with precision, her wolf guiding her, her bloodline's strength granting speed and power far beyond any alphas alone. She darted between the fray, stopping a blade aimed at Damien with a sweep of her glowing hands, energy erupting in arcs that sent enemies sprawling. Each strike, each movement, carried the weight of years of suffering, rejection, and silent endurance. And then, in the midst of the chaos, Lyra descended from the tower, her eyes burning with fury and desperation. "You will fail!" she hissed, lunging towards Selene with a dagger that gleamed under the moonlight. Selene met her gaze calmly. "You lied to protect yourself," she said softly, almost pitying her sister. "You betrayed not only me, but everyone who trusted you, and now the truth comes to light." With that, she raised her hands, and the energy from her bloodline surged like a tide. Lyra screamed as the wave of power struck, throwing her to the ground before Damien's feet. The dagger clattered away, useless, and the court stared in stunned silence. Damien approached slowly, his eyes never leaving Selene's. "The Luna," he whispered, awe threading through his words. "It's real. You are the one from the prophecy." Selene stepped forward, light radiating from her in the dim moonlight. "I am what I always was, Damien. Not the Omega they claimed I was. Not the pawn Lyra tried to make me, but the Luna born to protect and to rise." The surviving members of the court whispered among themselves, shock and reverence mixing in their voices. Lyra lay on the ground, trembling, powerless before the unleashed force of blood, love, and destiny. Selene turned toward Damien, her gaze softening but resolute. "This ends tonight. For him, for the pack, for everything Lyra tried to destroy." The battle raged for hours, packs colliding in a storm of claws, fangs, and raw power. Selene's strength turned the tide again and again, her aura cutting through the lies and fear that had gripped the fortress. Each movement of hers was precise, a dance of vengeance and protection, every strike reclaiming her name, her honor, her destiny. Finally, as dawn's first light kissed the horizon, the last of Lyra's conspirators fell, rooted and broken. The courtyard lay battered, torn, yet alive, the ground littered with fallen but cleansed of treachery. Damien stumbled to Selene's side, exhaustion and relief battling in his golden eyes. "You saved me. You saved all of us." Selene fell into his arms, her strength spent, but her spirit unbroken. "We saved each other," she whispered, voice trembling but proud. "And now the truth stands for all to see." Lyra, captured and exposed, was dragged before the court. Her lies unravelled, her betrayal naked under the light of the rising sun. The pack, once swayed by deceit, bowed in awe to the woman who had risen above all expectations. Selene, Luna, the bond and power that could not be broken. Damien held her close, feeling the pulse of her bloodline, the fire of her wolf, and the unyielding truth that she was his mate, his protector, and the force that would forever shape the fate of their kingdom. The storm had passed, but its mark remained, etched into the hearts of all who had witnessed it. Selene had claimed her place, not as an Omega, not as a pawn, but as the Luna of prophecy, a beacon of strength, love, and unshakable truth. The wind whispered through the ruins of the battlefield, carrying her name and hers alone. Selene, the Luna. Selene, the bond. Selene, the storm that had finally risen. And Damien knew, as he held her, that nothing, not betrayal, not war, not the fiercest of enemies, would ever tear them apart again. The battlefield was silent now, broken only by the wind rustling through scorched earth and shattered stone. The packs that remained, loyal and shaken, watched with wide eyes, some still trembling from the clash of fangs, claws, and blood-soaked fury. The sun rose slowly, painting the ruins in shades of gold and crimson, and in its light, the true scale of the night's storm became visible. Amidst the fallen, Damien knelt, body trembling, muscles screaming, golden eyes dimmed by exhaustion. Blood soaked his tunic, and his breathing was uneven, ragged, yet alive. Every movement was a struggle, every heartbeat a battle against weakness. Selene moved to him, her presence calm yet radiant, the Luna born of prophecy. Her hands hovered above him, trembling only slightly, not from fear, but from the gravity of the choice before her. For a heartbeat, she considered vengeance, the pain he had endured because of her being framed, the lies and betrayals that had surrounded them, and the near destruction of all they had fought to protect. It screamed for retribution. But her heart, steadfast and unwavering, silenced that cry. Love surged stronger than anger, stronger than fear, stronger than any shadow of doubt. She lowered herself beside him, pressing her hands to his chest where the deepest wounds ran. Her eyes glowed faintly, the power of her bloodline thrumming through her fingertips. "Damien," she whispered, voice steady but filled with emotion. "Let me hold you. Let me heal you. Let me be your strength as you have always been mine." His head lifted slightly, his gaze finding hers. Golden eyes clouded with pain met silver-lit resolve, and in that moment the bond between them burned hotter than any blade or sun. "You would forgive me?" he asked, voice cracking, barely above a whisper. Selene's fingers traced the line of his jaw, brushing away the grime and blood. "I don't forgive because you failed. I forgive because we are bound, because love is stronger than any wound, than any betrayal, because you are mine, and I am yours." The air around them seemed to still. Even the wind hesitated, and the surviving wolves drew back slightly, sensing something sacred, monumental, eternal. Selene closed her eyes and let her energy flow, not just into Damien's wounds, but into his soul, weaving her strength into his, binding him in a cocoon of warmth, of healing, of unbreakable devotion. Pain eased, colour returned to his pale skin, and his breathing found rhythm. Damien opened his eyes, and for the first time in memory, he lowered his pride completely. He bowed, not as Alpha King, not as ruler, but as a man before the woman who had saved him, who had saved them all. "Luna," he murmured, voice thick with reverence. "You are my equal, my heart, my destiny." Selene's lips curved in a soft, triumphant smile. She had once been rejected, scorned, cast aside by the very world she was born to protect. But now she stood in the light of truth, feared and loved, unyielding and eternal. The surviving pack members watched in stunned awe. The bonds of loyalty had shifted overnight. Fear of her strength, respect for her courage, and the undeniable truth of the prophecy settled upon them like the first calm after a storm. Even Kale, who had once doubted her, lowered his head in acknowledgement. "She is the true Luna," he whispered, voice shaking with respect. Selene rose, towering in grace and power, her hair glinting like silver in the rising sun, her aura radiating strength and serenity. Her eyes met Damien's, and in that look, centuries of hardship, love, loss, and triumph intertwined. Damien extended his hand. She took it without hesitation, their fingers lacing as though they were always meant to fit together. The bond pulsed visibly now, not just within their chests, but in the very air around them, shimmering in threads of light that even the surviving pack could feel. He pulled her close, forehead against hers, and whispered, Whatever storms come, whatever battles lie ahead, we face them as one. Selene's hand rested on his heart. Forever, she said simply. No matter the darkness, no matter the lies, no matter the world, we are eternal. The packs bowed in unison, heads lowered to honour the Luna who had risen from betrayal and pain, and to honour the Alpha King who had learned that strength and submission, power and love could exist in harmony. Lyra, bound and defeated, looked on from the edge of the court, her schemes unravelling, powerless against the force that had been born in Selene's blood. The whispers of treachery fell silent as the truth settled. Destiny had claimed its champion. Selene looked around the battlefield, at the broken walls, at the survivors, at the ashes of a war that had tested every heart. She inhaled deeply, letting the storm that had once raged within her finally rest. Damien's arms tightened around her, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling it synchronize with hers. The bond, once uncertain and fragile, now roared with certainty and eternity. Above them, the sun rose higher, spilling golden light across the ruins, illuminating the Luna in all her glory, her power undeniable, her heart unshakable, her destiny fulfilled. Selene, the rejected Omega, had become the storm Luna, loved, feared, and eternal. And Damien, the Alpha King, had finally learned what it meant to kneel, not in submission, but in recognition of a love stronger than any crown, any battle, any shadow that had ever dared to challenge them. The wind carried their names together, whispered through the surviving packs, sung in the rustling leaves, and echoed across the mountains. Selene and Damien, bound by blood, by heart, and by eternity. The storm had passed, but its legacy, their legacy, would last forever.